please work with your tenants association to take those opportunities. Next, there's been a lot of talk about condo or co-op conversions and what they might mean for the community and when they might happen. Well, if you are a renter, a rent-stabilized tenant, indeed, we are all today renters and rent-stabilized tenants as a result of the Roberts versus Tishman-Speyer case, you need to understand this. You will be able to stay as a renter. Nobody is going to force you to do anything, and you can continue to live in your unit at rent-stabilized levels. And I'm just going to repeat that. So I want to be really clear, and there should be no uncertainty about that point. Rent-stabilized tenants are protected by the law, and provided that the law is renewed, you will be able to continue paying your rent-stabilized rents under any scenario that would unfold. Okay? So, join the fight to defend rent stabilization, but you should not otherwise be worried about the discussions of conversion that are taking place. I should note that CW Capital does not dispute this, and senior leadership of CW Capital has expressed their clear understanding that many residents will wish to remain as renters. CW has made it very clear that they would like to pursue a non-eviction conversion in which nobody would ever be asked to move or do anything that they don't want to do. Now, for those who are sitting here today hoping that there may be an opportunity to buy, the circumstances may, in fact, allow for that. I'm sure that you have questions about price, questions about timing. I get those questions a lot, and of course I'm a tenant too. I have my own questions about whether it is something that my wife and I would want to consider to do if we were offered that opportunity. The Tenants Association's advisors are going to address that issue in greater detail in a moment. But the most important fact here is that the TA and this community, organized and working together, will be able to demand a good and responsible deal, one that protects the current tenants, but also preserves Stuyvesant Town and Peter Cooper for what they were intended to be, an enclave in Manhattan for the middle class. We can say this much about price right now. A conversion plan that is offered to tenants will have to make economic sense for tenants. If it's not a good value, then why would anyone opt out of the security of rent stabilization? They wouldn't, and they shouldn't. Not only that, but CW Capital will need to devise a structure that creates incentives for many, many tenants to want to take advantage of it. And this is what puts their interests in line with those of the Tenants Association. And it's one of the reasons why I am optimistic about our ability to work something out here. But on timing, it is going to take a while. This is going to take years, not months. Some folks are worried that along the way, a conversion plan will create divisions among tenants. A recent article speculated that as we go forward, the good people of this community will start fighting with each other. But let's be real. There are 25,000 people who live in Stuyvesant Town and Peter Cooper, each with their own circumstances, and there are probably 25,000 ideas, at least 25,000, about how we should approach this challenge. But to say that we will actually be divided is not to understand this community. Think about it this way. Today, there are tenants who pay all over the lot in rent. Some people pay $4,000 a month for a unit, others who pay $1,000 a month for essentially the same but unrenovated unit right next door. That is a fact of our community today. Now, if anything, that should be the source of division if such division were to exist. And yet, for the most part, all of those tenants want exactly the same things. The ability to live in peace, without excessive noise, without dog droppings on the grass, and to enjoy the playgrounds and the qualities that make the community so great. And go ahead, you can applaud that. And for the vast majority of us, we coexist wonderfully. That harmony will, of course, be a priority going forward. We are a community. To the extent that there is division, it is between the tenants that I just mentioned and those who do not respect the place, who congregate, people who congregate on front stoops smoking cigarettes, or who do not pick up after their dogs, or who make noise and are not considerate of their neighbors. And I should add, people who treat the place like a dorm because, well, to them it is a dorm. With our participation in this process, we will have a strong voice and an ability to address these sorts of issues directly. On these ownership questions, I also want to caution you about misinformation. Our neighbors frequently speculate, because this is all very exciting stuff, about what is going on and what could be. And rumors take hold. Rumors and misinformation are not going to be our friend in this process. I encourage you to seek out good information from the Tenants Association, from my office, from any of the other elected officials' offices that are represented here. You're going to get good and accurate information today. I encourage you to share what you learn with your neighbors, and of course, it is also being videotaped so it can be shared with them at a later date, and you should connect with the Tenants Association on how to obtain the tape. We've touched on rent stabilization and ownership options, with more detail to come on that, and now a word about maintenance. Rose Associates is officially the new manager as of last Friday at 5 p.m. Although I noticed that there's still some vehicles with the TS on them, Al, so you're going to have to peel those off. They have committed to me personally that we will not see any drop in service, and that any changes that they make in the property will be done in a spirit of cooperation with your Tenants Association. And we will all hold them to that. But you know, they've been here before. They manage the property under MetLife, so they're not total novices at this. But in any period of transition, things happen. When you see problems, I ask that you report them to management immediately, but also to your Tenants Association so the TA can track them and demand that Rose get them fixed without delay. Now, this is particularly important, I think, in a moment of transition between two management companies. So please be vigilant. Please watch carefully for any changes. Report them to management and report them to the Tenants Association. And I know that as many people are concerned about the maintenance day to day, there are also people who are concerned about maintenance issues if they were ever to consider buying their units. People want to know that the infrastructure of the buildings is not going to fall apart. The plumbing, the boiler, the plumbing, you know, I knew I was going to get a reaction on plumbing. The boilers, the facades, you name it. People don't want to buy unless they know that maintenance costs are not going to explode on them down the line. And you should know that if you are concerned about that, it is the right concern, as it would be for any buyer of any unit or home anywhere in the world. You will need to have a much clearer understanding of the condition of the property before anyone ever sees a piece of paper with a proposed price on it. That much is fundamental. There's so much more to say, and there are many questions that people have already submitted in advance, and they're going to be addressed by Paul Weiss and Mola. So before I close, I just want to make 2 points, and one of them is on a personal level, and one of them is on a community level. On a personal note, I wanted to share with you some very happy news of my own. You all know that I have lived in this community my whole life. My mother moved into the neighborhood in 1968, 410 East 20th Street, and she and my dad, they moved across the street to Peter Cooper Village a number of years later, and they continue to live in the same apartment where I grew up. Well, that nice tradition is going to continue. I'm very pleased to share with you that my wife Zoe and I are expecting a baby boy, our first in January. And I promise he will be a good neighbor. And on a community level, I really want to recognize the work of the Tenants Association in getting us to this point today. You may not be surprised to know that events like today's, the mailers, the flyers under doors, none of these things happen by themselves. And in a community of this size, it is labor-intensive and extremely difficult to reach 25,000 people and get their attention. This work is done by a well-run, well-organized, and completely unpaid volunteer organization run by Al Doyle and the board of directors. Let's give them a big round of applause. They have established a reputation for this body as a highly influential and politically connected organization. You'll remember the New York Times published a story about how the tenants of this community are being wooed rather than ignored, and how the TA's political influence has grown, and how nobody wants to antagonize the tenants. In short, you all look so nice, but you are a pretty scary bunch. Because of your organization, your unity, and your support from elected officials, the Times is now reporting that that CW Capital can and must roll up its sleeves to begin working with you. Now, this is going to be a tenant-led process with the full support of your elected officials. And I promise to do everything that I can to support that effort, and I know that together we will be successful. So thank you very much. So I now have the privilege of introducing our next speaker, and before I do, I just want to, it's going to be Alex Schmidt, by the way, but I want to recognize the fact that the great borough president of Manhattan, Scott Stringer, has joined us, a great friend of this community. So you all know Alex Schmidt. He is no stranger to anybody in this room now. He is an attorney at Wolf Haldenstein, and he is the lead lawyer on the Roberts versus Tishman Speyer case. We all gathered at the Stein Senior Center to watch him argue the case before the Court of Appeals. And now I give you Alex Schmidt for an update.
I'm not Alex Schmidt, but I just wanted to remind you to your questions on index cards, if you have written them up and haven't had them collected, wave so a volunteer can come and get them. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see you again. My job today is to bring you up to date on what has transpired in the Roberts litigation since we last met in March. And there have been a number of very significant and important positive developments that have transpired. To fully appreciate the significance of them, though, I want to go back a little bit in time and just remind you of what we did to get to March so that I can then explain what has happened since March. As you all know, in January of 2007, 9 of your neighbors very bravely sued 2 sets of defendants. The current owners of the property at that time, the Tishman Speyer defendants, and the former owners of the property, the MetLife defendants. And in their lawsuit, they sought principally to achieve a number of things. One was to have the courts declare that apartments, market-rate apartments, in the complex had been illegally deregulated. That was objective number 1. Objective number 2 was to have tenants compensated for that illegal deregulation to the tune of about $200 million. And the third principal objective was to have their action, which was brought strictly by the 9 of them individually, certified as a class action so that they could represent all of the market rate tenants, present and former, about 10,000 people in total, in that one action. If the class action was not certified by the court, then the action, the Roberts action, would be all about those 9 plaintiffs alone. And all of the other 10,000 class members would then have to bring their own individual proceeding. So the purpose of the class action was to try to consolidate everyone's claims into one suit so that everything could be resolved at one time and to avoid the need to have 10,000 separate lawsuits be resolved independently and separately over the span of who knows how many years. So in October of last year, as you all know, the Court of Appeals rendered its decision. And that decision held that the apartments had indeed been illegally deregulated.